back in 2001, when we first began working with Gary Gygax, he pitched this wonderful series of books to us. He called them the Gygaxian Fantasy Worlds, and what he envisioned was this encyclopedic set of books for role players, writers, game designers, the whole lot of us, that we could use in making our games, creating our adventures, writing stuff for publishable content, whatever it may be. And there was really no end to what he envisioned this series to be. We eventually published The Canting Crew, The World Builder, Living Fantasy, 7 volumes in total. We had another 3 that were ready to go to print, another 3 or 4 after that we were working on. So the series was really open-ended. We are bringing these back. That's what this Kickstarter is. We've got 7 books online ready to be printed. We've got another 3 right after that we want to get it minimally out as we were working on them at the time. Those will be out definitely in PDF, depending on how well the Kickstarter does, and maybe even more than that once we kind of push beyond the necessary stretch goals and all that mess. But welcome to the what we're calling the Gary Gygax World Building Archives, and please give us your support. Share it around if you can. Pledge if you can. Whatever you need to do, whatever you can do for us and the memory of Gary Gygax, we very much appreciate it.
Trollord Games. Join the fray.
back in 2001, when we first began working with Gary Gygax, he pitched this wonderful series of books to us. He called them the Gygaxian Fantasy Worlds, and what he envisioned was this encyclopedic set of books for role players, writers, game designers, the whole lot of us, that we could use in making our games, creating our adventures, writing stuff for publishable content, whatever it may be. And there was really no end to what he envisioned this series to be. We eventually published The Canting Crew, The World Builder, Living Fantasy, 7 volumes in total. We had another 3 that were ready to go to print, another 3 or 4 after that we were working on. So the series was really open-ended. We are bringing these back. That's what this Kickstarter is. We've got 7 books online ready to be printed. We've got another 3 right after that we want to get it minimally out as we were working on them at the time. Those will be out definitely in PDF, depending on how well the Kickstarter does, and maybe even more than that once we kind of push beyond the necessary stretch goals and all that mess. But welcome to the what we're calling the Gary Gygax World Building Archives, and please give us your support. Share it around if you can. Pledge if you can. Whatever you need to do, whatever you can do for us and the memory of Gary Gygax, we very much appreciate it.
Trollord Games. Join the fray.
And me. I've been here the whole time, hiding behind the curtain, waiting for the opportune moment to strike and tell you all a story. Please welcome in Wolf Alone. Hello, hello. Mortal, welcome in. DM Chris, hello, hello. All part of the early crew. How is everyone? A slow creep up on the Kickstarter. Really wanted that last book, but unless somebody generous with about $30,000 shows in the next 9 days. Here's the thing. I think we're going to get it easy. I think we are going to smash this Kickstarter. And even like the progress that's been being made over the past couple of days, it's slow, but it's encouraging. You turned your desk around. No, so actually what I did, I think I can show you. Nick, do you mind if I show them?
No, kill it.
Our situation? Okay, so we took our bedroom and put it where our office is.
Damn.
And took our office and put it where our bedroom was. So this used to be our bedroom.
I wish I had one of those like fake nose mustache eyeglasses things to put on real quick.
So here we've got Commander Blub with our Switch on him. That's a little bookshelf with some plants. We have our nice rug with a chair and then like a little seating area over there. Super fun. And then there's my love. And we work across from each other and it's great.
It's super great.
And it's a really good situation and it's way, way better. This room has beautiful big windows and we weren't enjoying them because every night we would just like pull the blinds down and then wouldn't spend any time in our bedroom during the day. So 2 crane sightings in one day is a delightful day. Well, hey, that's going to be the case until the end of the Kickstarter. I'm going to be doing lives on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, reading from the World Builders Archive. And then Steve is going to be live on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Why are your headphones askew? So if I have them both on, I can't really hear myself talk.
I do the same thing.
Yeah, right? I feel like I'm gonna like say something that my brain didn't authorize because I can't quite hear myself. Do you know what I mean? It's like that same urge where like if you're standing on a high place and there's just that thought in your brain that's like, hey, jump off and go.
What if you accidentally just fling yourself off?
What if you just accidentally flung yourself off a cliff? It's that, but for words and my brain. Long shot. Welcome back for month 37. God damn, good lord. Welcome back. It's good to see you. Get open back headphones. That's a thing? You should get some open back headphones. Oh my god, I've never heard of this before. Did you guys hear that car? That's actually what cranes do. Get open back headphones. This veal parm sub is delicious, that is all. Why did you have to tell me that? Oh my god. Help! Jump and fly. Oh, fair. Question, what will you be reading tonight? George, I am so glad you asked. This moment has been very long awaited by me. Today, we depart for a bit from the Codex of Aihrde. We will return to it, but tonight we have the first draft of what is currently being called the Pools of Dunhollow. So the 3 books of fiction that I have read a couple of times here, The Houseless God, The Mirrored Soul, and The Giant's Board. Those short story collections are all leading up to this novella of about 21,000 words, which we now have here. This is a first draft, but it is a continuation of Yurik and Ava's story. So we're going to jump in and we're going to go see what's up with them. If you don't remember, Yurik is, they don't ever use the word in the stories, but Yurik is a paladin, Ava is a ranger, and they are also accompanied by a dwarf named Folkgard. Yurik and Ava avenged Folkgard's father, who was murdered by, I think, orcs, or demons of some kind. And they laid his body to rest and rescued his soul from a minor demon lord. Or not a lord, but just like a little guy, a weird little guy who had his soul in a mirror. They rescued him. And Folkgard now feels that he is honor-bound to help Yurik and Ava with their task. They were accompanied by a priest named Gregor. However, Gregor became lost in a storm and took a very rough tumble down a hill and landed into the territory of a dryad, mortally wounded. And so Yurik and Ava left Gregor in the care of the dryad, promising to go to the Pools of Dunhollow, where, according to legend, I think either the waters of the pools or like there's a plant that grows there, but they can save Gregor's life. So they're going to the pools to try to find something to help their friend who is living in a tree with a dryad. So that's the little recap. And I see no reason why we should not simply jump right in, because I'm very excited to read this. We have an hour here. Feel free to settle into whatever kind of task you'd like to do alongside, whether it's writing or if you're doing art or cleaning or doing homework or doing work or whatever. This is a very cozy stream where we can just do some body doubling and do our stuff together. So get yourself a sweater or a good blanket and a beverage. Trolls ah. The gang gets Gregor some grapes. He needs some milk. And Casualty, welcome in. Okay. The Pools of Dunhollow. I crossed through the Dunhollow once, long ago, when my bones were more pliant. I traveled with a small company to the Shadow Mountains beyond. I cannot now remember our captain's name, a wizard of sorts. Yurik sat astride his large war horse, his body resting in the saddle, iron-shod boots firmly planted in iron stirrups. It is a strange wood. Ava moved her paint down the bank, through the tall rush and into the water. She sat lazily in the saddle, as she often did, one foot and leg draped over the horn. The paint nuzzled the water, splashing it about to look for the right place to drink, dragging the reins and lead through the water. Ava looked up into the tree line, passing the bank to look beyond, into the deeper reaches of the forest. Instinctively, She pulled her long red hair back, tightening it into a tail where branch and limb would find little purchase. This is a peaceful wood. It's quiet. Do people live here? Aye, some do. Near to the forest edge, wild folk of sorts. They dwell as far from the cobbled haunts of fat merchants and taxmen as they can. You'll see their homesteads like forts, or a few walled villages here and there. They eke a living out of the world as they can. Trade some with those who wander this country looking for bounty and fame, but stick to themselves mostly. There was a tavern, as I recall, not too far into the wood. Well, not really a tavern, but a low building of sod and limb, where we stayed a few nights to drink and rest, but that was years ago. Turning in his saddle, he looked at the dwarf. Folkard, doesn't dun mean whole to you dwarves? The dwarf sat astride his stout pony, rolling the mule's lead in his hand. Some such, yes. Dun is deep without understanding. Pits dug by your red god. This is the Dunlop of our legends, a place haunted by the memory of the stone giants, the shackled dead of the trolls, and other such tales. We do not come here, not since Inang's young self made war on our people in the early days of our glory. The trio stood upon a small stream, some 60 feet from bank to bank. It moved languidly, its shallow waters clear, but the dark brown stone beneath made it seem otherwise. The stream bent back to the west and north, slowly coiling around the deeper forest on the far side. The whole was fresh with new growth, as spring was fully upon the land. The white oaks that towered along the creek's edge stood straight and tall. The trees beyond were similar. But all along the far bank grew flowering jonquils, clustered in bunches, bright yellow petals offering a sharp contrast to the deep greens of grass, bush, and the scabby gray bark of the trees. The forest seemed to open further in. Blue, the massive warhorse that Yurik sat, watched Ava's paint for a moment, and when the smaller steed settled in to drink, he splashed into the water, brushing up against the small horse, pushing her to drink from the water she settled on. By the first wind, Blue, Yurik pulled hard on the reins, turning the horse upstream and off the smaller horse, who seemed oblivious to the larger horse. Nor had Ava, who kept looking into the trees. Beast, if we'd not crossed Olive or Saul thrice together, I'd leave you behind to fend for yourself. Blue moved upstream some feet, stooping, began drinking. Yurik unbuckled his mail's shoulder clasp. Best water your pony and mule, dwarf. Not sure what lies within. Hey, welcome in, Crackety Jones. Plenty of water, that's for sure, but there is something else. Ava dropped from the paint into the cool water of the spring. Knee-high leather boots kept her feet dry. Uncasing her bow, she crossed the water and climbed the far bank, passing through the rushes and jonquils to come beneath the eaves of the wood. Hey, welcome in, Jeremy. Hope you're feeling better. She began pacing the bank, slowly, taking note of the ground, looking for water slides, trails, and other familiar markings. As she did so, Yurik urged the horse on. They walked up the middle of the stream, pacing Ava. The paint finished quenching its thirst and followed slowly, staying in the larger horse's wake. The dwarf turned his pony, too, leading the mule upstream. Thus, the three of them moved north and west up the unnamed creek, Ava just in the eave of the wood, Yurik in the water of the stream, and Folkguard on the southern bank. The mountains loomed in the distance, a large finger of the Shadow Mountains called the Eastern Spur. You've seen it Oops, sorry. You've been in it before, this Dunhollow Wood. Aye, some years back. A troop of us, 5 in all. The wizard, damned if his name isn't Eck or Ike or something such, promised good coin to bring him to the Shadow Mountains. We crossed the inner sea and housed in Most for a while. Once supplied, we came here, across the Warden Plains. Somewhere, there is a bridge that we crossed into the Dunhollow, but this stream needs no bridge. He stopped the horse and looked about. Something is off, good Folkguard. This cannot be the Troll Tongue, lest the world be turning faster than I thought. He looked for Ava, but she was out of sight. Instinctively, he tightened his grip upon the rein. Blue felt the change overcome the night, as if night had suddenly passed into day. The destrier immediately turned about, following the direction the night looked. Unbidden, he began moving through the water, climbing the far bank with little effort, snorting a warning to any that might be hiding in the brush that grew on the water's edge. Yurik took hold of the haft of his large battle axe. Mounting the bank gave them some elevation, and he spied Ava some hundred yards in, standing still, listening to some noise that escaped the night. She looked back at him with a slightly bemused look. He relaxed, and the horse did as well, though reluctantly. The late day's sun shone through the high trees, lancing the deep greens with faded yellow shafts. She stood upon the edge of one, her long red hair pinned and drawn back in a half-bun and tail. Her leather jerkin, worn smooth with months of travel, hung to her waist. Green pants, a colorless, long-sleeved shirt, and high, laced leather boots cast her in a role befitting a ranger. She held her bow and 2 arrows in her left hand, arrows beneath forefingers. Her long knife she wore lateral to her belt, and her quiver hung on her left side. The light caught her face just right, and Yurik could see the clean scar that ran up her left cheek. He thought for a moment that in all these months of travel since they met on the far of the Darkenfold, she had not spoken of that scar once. But then again, he had never asked. "What now, my lady? Do you pause thus to capture the day's failing light, or have you spied us a tavern to fill our cups with?" He laughed when he heard Folkguard shout something about a tavern behind him. "No tavern, Yurik, but plenty to drink. This is not the Dunhollow Wood of which we seek. This is some offshoot, maybe, but not far from here is a river, fast by the sound of it." "Oh, that makes more sense. I thought the mountain glaciers had dried up, and the Troll Tongue made a stream where a river once stood. That would be the Troll Tongue you hear. We cannot cross it here, as I recall. We'll have to double back and find the bridge. We've come too far north." She turned back to the forest and looked around for a moment. The air was clear, and the wood peaceful. "Go back to the stream and follow it down. I'll meet you where it joins the river. It cannot be far. I'll bring some fresh game for tonight's meal." "All other things aside and behind, the fresh meat you've brought to our cook fires these past journeys has left me a debt I'll not repay in this lifetime. You've already paid it." With a smile, she turned and moved into the wood. He watched her for a moment, casting about for evil, but nothing touched him, and with that, he turned the steed back to the stream. He crossed, calling for the paint as he did so, and joined the dwarf. Together they turned around and began heading east along the banks of the stream. "We're lost. And found. You know this Gregory fellow, the priest. You say he was taken by a dryad in the south country, snared by her magic and beauty. And you've come all this way with the Lady Ava here to fetch the waters of the Dunhollow to trade for his freedom. Have you ever considered that he might not want his freedom? Mayhap your companion, who is Soft with the drink. Is soft with the woodland fae as well. He smiled into his beard at his joke. Perhaps, my friend, but I'll leave no companion in bondage, whether they will it or no. A noble sentiment, and well spoken. One would think you know the Andanuth. I know of it, and I know your people find a life with no purpose, one ill spent. Aye, that we do. Shut up. As soon as I read it, I was like, aye, that we do. The mule stopped to pull at some fresh grass and caused the dwarf to stop. Come now, mule, we'll eat tonight along the banks of this slow-moving current. Fetch not those poor shoots, and you can have some water from the river bank. Wait. Fetch not these poor shoots, and you can have some from the river bank. He tugged at it gently. The mule dutifully followed. Ava paced them for some time, following the bend of the stream, but soon enough turned toward the sound of the river. Passing beneath the tall trees proved easy enough. Little brush impeded her, though saplings grew here and there, struggling with their larger kin for light and soil. In time, she picked up a game trail to bag a small deer. Expertly, she strung it up, bled it, and after discarding the parts she didn't want to carry, ported the rest toward the confluence of the stream and river. She followed the rushing waters of the Troll Tongue until the country gave way, and the southern plains opened up to her. She spied the stream not long after, and then the spark of fire, and the dwarf who was setting it. Crossing down the tongue of land that led to the confluence, she stopped and looked at the small encampment. The sun lay beyond the mountains to the west, but a little still played upon the thickening green of the early spring plains. A dark horizon to her left, north, promised the Dunhollow, but the camp lay still in the open. The mule and pony were carefully picketed, both chewing on some grass that the dwarf had harvested. Folkguard stood next to the fire, stoking the tinder they had gathered. He wore his ring mail still, and his faded blue pants. A broad-bladed dagger tucked into a scabbard on his belt was not his only weapon, but the axe she could not see. His huge dark beard dominated his face, but it was tightly braided, bound with brass rings marked with runes. Though these runes were invisible in the fading light, she knew them well, for he braided his beard with them when he expected battle. The debt he owed Yurik was an odd one, but she understood. For his part, Yurik stood upon the bank of the stream, looking north into the dark stain that was the Dunhollow wood proper. He wore his heavy chain shirt, with the fur-lined cloak over his shoulders. His dark pants and heavy boots were worn and faded. His right hand, as always when he stood in thought, rested lightly on the pommel of his longsword, his left dangling as if lifeless next to it. His hair was growing out again, dark with just a stain of gray in it, though it matched his beard, which he had not cut since they boarded the merchant ship in Most some weeks back. Blue, unsaddled, munched grass next to the paint some yards off. The paint suddenly lifted her head and looked at the ranger. Ears perked forward, and then she snorted and went right back to eating. Ava came out of the wood. "I've food for that fire. We'll eat well tonight." Yurik relaxed. "The water is deeper here. You want me to come across and get you?" Looking at the still water, she could see it was deeper by several feet than her boots would allow. It was still early spring yet, and the night promised to be cold. I've no desire to sleep with wet feet, fire or no." Calling the large horse, Yurik vaulted onto its bare back with little effort. He rode upstream several hundred feet. Crossing, he turned downstream to meet Ava halfway. She took his hand and pulled herself up behind him. She let the deer hang low, so any blood that may still fall would not bother either man or mount, and her free hand took Yurik by the waist. Yurik marveled at the smell of her clean hair. It's a love story. Blue took no notice of the deer, clean hair, or added weight, and turned around with little guidance, and moved back upstream to recross the water. Does your deer hang low? That's so dumb. I love it. In short order, all three companions were sprawled around a bright, burning fire, enjoying the clean smell of roasting venison and drinking clean water. So, Yurik, tell me, you've traveled in this wood before. What do you know of it? What dangers lie for us between here and the pools? And this wizard fellow you spoke of, Derek? His name was Eric. No, it was Imak. Imak of Kemi, a city in Karelia. Imak, yes, that was it. He claimed to be of some secret order called the Mystic Enclave, a guild of wizards of sorts dedicated to their own craft, and their one-eyed master Aristobulus. It was a wild journey. We know of Aristobulus in the south, a powerful mage who fought the Horned God in the years of the Winter Dark. Ava sliced a thin piece of meat from the roasting deer. Some pay homage to him. Aye, wizards are strange folk. Yurik looked up at the sky. The last of the sunlight faded, and the world slipped into ever-darkening shades of green. Tongues of flame licked the dark, casting shadows upon the trio reposed around the camp's fire. The night looked beyond Ava, into the black line of the forest. The faint sound of the river came to him, but was lost in some conjured memory of a journey long ago. We entered the wood with good and high spirits. A ranger led us. I can't remember his name. I walked next to Imak. We had no horses with us. This was before Blue joined me. And the rest followed as suited them. For hours, just short of a day, we walked and saw nothing but a few birds and a startled whitetail. It ran and we paid no heed. Just before evening, we came to a low house of sod and turf. There was a child out front, sitting upon a stump. He gave us welcome and invited us for food and drink. We took up his offer and spent the night there. There were a few folk about. They called it the sod house. Would that we had not found it, then perhaps we would not have crossed the Dun Hollow at all, but left it and turned south and made our journey to the mountains from the Deuced Plains. The following day, we set off again, spirits high. The child's father told us to cross the wood quickly and spend no time out in the night. Where he thought we might escape, the night was beyond us, so we thanked him, paid him little heed, and traveled on. The wood is a goodly place to travel, to walk in. It's hard to describe. In the light of day, the forest is wild but calm. The trees are old, tall, thick of bole, and grow deep in the ground, but they do not crowd one another, not like the Darkenfold or other old woods. They stand apart. Branches at great length are spacious, and the light reaches the forest floor. The days went by with ease, but the nights were not so much. Spirits of the damned from Noct hounded us that night, clamoring upon our camp, drawn no doubt by the fire or our warm bodies, I do not know. The priest held them at bay, the rest of us assisting as they could, but on the second night, a haunt took us by surprise. So diseased a creature, whether alive or dead, I could not say. He mangled the priest's arm so that he suffered some affliction that left him powerless to move, and we were forced to carry him a great long while. We made it to the pools and set up camp there where he recovered, but his spirits were broken and he became fearful. It's hard to say what happened after that. There was a creature in the water, a hag, nixie, what have you, that set its glamours upon us, such that it bewitched Aihrde, that was his name, a roguish fellow from Most, to enter the water where he drowned. We could not fetch his body, though we saw it there beneath the water, tangled in the thick stem of the flowering sun pads that grew there. We circled the pool all that day, and the nixie attempted to lure us into the water. I slew her there, and pulled her up on the bank so she could not heal in the water. There she dried, and her flesh fell away. This was more than the ranger had signed on for, and he fled. I do not think he made it from the wood, for we never heard of it again, nor saw sign of him. That left the three of us, Imach, the priest, and I. What was that priest's name? Ava threw another stick in the fire and stoked it. Not a good forester if he became not a good forester if he became lost, tracking his own trail. That he did not do. He should have went south the way we came in, but instead he went south and east, heading for the mountains, he said. They're closer and I'll be safe above the wood line, he said, mayhap, but my guess is his bones lie in the turf, and his spirit a haunt of these very woods. The wizard didn't turn around, or ask to. Folkgard looked unconcerned for the spirits of the dead. Folkgard looked unconcerned, for the spirits of the dead have little pull on the dwarven people. No. He was determined. You know how they can be when on the scent of their sorcery. After that, the going was much slower. With no guide, the country was just wilderness. Twice the trails confused us, and we became turned around, only to spy the mountains from some glade or the other and make our way to them again. But it was on the fifth night that a fog took us. A mist, really, thick with evil importance. The priest, what was his name, began praying and casting out. Imach but sat near the fire, as close as he could get, and shrouded himself in some glamour. Yurik trailed off and sat quietly for some time. Then, rousing himself, I know nothing about the priest's fall, the why of it, but to say he went mad, and after much tearing of the flesh, turned upon us, me. I drove him from the camp. I heard his mad screams all night, coming from here and there. I found him in the morning, mutilated, dead. I could not say if it was by his hands or the hands of others. That afternoon, we found a foot of the mountain and climbed out of the haunted wood, fetched whatever the wizard wanted, and made our way by perilous path south and into the Gotland, avoiding the wood. It was a wild adventure, and one, it seems, I repeat. Ava leaned back, looking up at the early sky. Best we should get some sleep. Who knows what tomorrow will bring? But I will say that I doubt fear will play into my tracking, for growing wild in the Darkenfold, I cannot imagine the world with greater haunts. A goblin is going to pour boiling milk on their faces. Why not their bare skulls? Cowardice. That boiling milk needs to go on that bare skull. Anyway, the three rode through the morning, following the eastern bank of the Trolltongue River. The sky was clear, a few fleeting clouds skirting the unfolding blue. The Dunhollow wood clung to the far bank of the fast-moving river, a green wall of early spring growth. The flowering redbuds were in full bloom, spotting the ever-thickening greens with a dash of brilliant color. The white-petaled flowers of a few dogwoods offered further contrast. The morning was warm, with little breeze to bother the travelers. Just before noon, they spied a gauzy stain in the distance, beyond the further rise. There was a flimsy smoke rose. A flimsy smoke rose in no discernible pattern. Largely white, likely with several sources, the smoke acted more lazy than hazardous. Yurik took note and gently touched heels to Blue, picking up the pace. The heavy warhorse obliged, but did so with some noise of hoof upon the turf, though he sensed the subtle change in his companion's demeanor. Ava, spurring her paint to a trot, pulled up alongside him. Perhaps a more subtle approach? Perhaps. He did not slow his steed, but let her spur forward and ride alone across the wide vale. By the time he reached the center of the depression, she had rode up its shallow flank, abandoned her horse, and crawled to the top of the rise for vantage. Folkguard's pony kept pace with Blue, though with some effort. As Yurik began crossing the rise, the lazy smoke turned black, rising in sudden violence, fed now by fierce heat and a new fuel. Ava rose from where she lay, abandoning stealth, and walked a few steps forward, her short bow in hand. As Yurik passed the paint where it stood, expectantly watching, that horse followed, capping the rise next to the ranger. Yurik stopped. The rise gave way to a cacophony of clamorous violence. The bellow of a flame newly caught, terrified screams of a woman who hope had left, but the fight had not, animals braying curses, the shouts of a child, and the resounding thud of iron on bone. Down the long slope stood a small thorp of stone and wood houses with sod roofs. 2 of them burned, the fire having passed from the roofs to the walls. A 3rd house stood untouched. A low wall lay upon the forest side, holding some sheep, a lone steer, and a milk cow that bellowed its fear. A smattering of men moved about. Some bodies lay on the ground, one being cruelly hacked at by its assailant. Some distance from the violence, down the slope beneath where Yurik stood, were 2 children. A small girl holding some mewling cat, and a boy before her, maybe 10 or 12. The boy held a woodsman's axe in hand, and stood off a tall, gaunt-looking man who, with a glaive resting on his shoulder, approached them with the grim certitude that only those who murder without compunction carry. Do not kill the boy. Do not kill the boy. Yurik heard Ava say it, though her voice was soft and quiet. Even so, the man's blade cut the boy down. The child's axe held futilely in front of him. As he fell, the door to the unburnt cabin burst asunder, and a woman broke out, bloodied and disheveled, shouting some name the flames consumed. A man pursued her, laughing, with wild gestures to the house and his comrades. For the fleetest moment, Ava saw Yurik's face. The tensions of the long journey were gone. Fear and hope, joy and loss, all left the man astride that steed, replaced now with serenity one found on the death masks of the ancient Ethram. But there was no serenity here, for a violence of rage washed over her from him, punctuated by the grating sound of his blade as he freed it from his scabbard. Blue felt it too, more so than any other creature in all the world. The transformation in his rider's being was instant and passed through to the horse like a wave of constance. Even before the blade cleared the scabbard, Blue's muscles unwound, and the primeval furor of the horse's lust for dominion over all things was unleashed. The 2 launched down the hill before thought was put to deed. The green turf flew and the ground shook. Such was the horse's passage that Yurik's helm, slung as it was on the saddle horn, fell away, thumping and tumbling after the mountain of muscle and steel that bore down upon the man and child. Ava leapt astride the paint, Folkguard, Yurik's to battle! She tore after them. The dwarf watched her vanish over the rise, and with little thought dropped the mule's lead and spurred his pony on. Stout and bred of a long line of sure-footed steeds, the pony broke into a run faster than one might expect, and bore the dwarf over the rise. He rode with hands free to uncase his long-hafted battle-axe, and opened up with a dirge of war that those folks of Norgorod Cam are like to sing before enjoining the battle above or below. Yurik bore down upon man and child, driving a tumult of wind before them. The man tossed the girl hard to the side and braced himself to drive the glaive into the horse's broad chest. In mere seconds, the horse crossed the wide yard and was upon him. Blue lowered his head as if to ram the man, and the bandit saw an opening and lifted the glaive to smite the beast in the neck instead. It proved his undoing, for in that moment of shifting hesitation from one obvious target to a smaller one, the horse threw its head to the side, the metal butt grazed its neck and was thrown high. With that, the force of the charge carried man and mount past the bandit, but not before Yurik, in a cross-body swing, decapitated the man, sending his head tumbling across the green sward. Shouts of fear and consternation rose from the village as bandits spilled out of the house and from behind it, a dozen or more. Their easy raid turned foul, but the promise of riches the knight bore in saddle and gear offered more motivation to join this new fight. The first of them stood his ground, sword and shield in hand. The others rushed forward. Blue drove fully into the man, driving the shield upward into his chin, shattering his jaw even as his bones crumbled from the force of the 2,000-pound muscle-bound beast. The man fell beneath the horse, which did not slow its charge, and it trampled him, driving hooves into the man's groin, disemboweling him as it thundered into the tumult of the rest of his companions. Yurik paid no heed to the madness beneath him, but leaning forward, he let his sword arm drop, the blade's point nigh touching the ground. Even before they rode into the pack of bandits, Ava's arrows began to fall, one striking a shield, another the ground by the men, a third transfixing a bandit's calf. She shot wild from horseback. The knight plowed into the cluster, lifting his blade in a wide arc. He severed the arm of one man at the shoulder, and brought the sword down to crash with ruin into another's skull. Yurik broke through the press, and plowed into the wall, knocking stones hither and yon. Turning, he saw the bandits in full press rushing him. Turning Blue to the left, he brought his sword arm to bear, even as the first of them pressed in on him. He clove flesh, rent bone, and showered blood upon wall and yard. But they were hard on him, one upon the wall, another stabbing at Blue, who in turn slung his massive blue-black head into the man's face, breaking bone and rupturing the globe of his eye. Twice Yurik felt the sting of iron on his flesh, once on his leg and a second time on his back. He spun the horse into the melee, scattering the men as he cut another across the chest and arm. They pressed him still, with the lust for untold wealth in their craven minds. The dirge broke over them, as Folkguard, dropping sure-footed from his mount, plowed into their ranks. Wielding his feathered axe two-handed, he swept one's legs from beneath, taking one off at the knee, and lifting it, buried the axe in a second's back. Ava, too, had joined the melee, tossing her bow aside. She dropped off the horse, holding on its mane until judging its speed, and let go, and hit the earth with a tumble coming up some few feet from the battle with her long knife in hand. She hamstrung one man, who fell backward so that she could catch him with her arm and sent him to the earth with her cruel steel in his chest. No sooner had he died than she was on another. In moments, the bandits' numbers were reduced by half, and two of them turned to run, and a third was ground to earth by Blue. The knight, still a horse, clove the one off the wall, releasing the tension of bone-bound organs across him and the horse's hindquarters. Folkgard drove his axe haft into another, who fell to his knees, and though he sought to beg for life, the dwarf's eyes were filled with the boy's innocence as he ended the man with an overhead swing. Ava dispatched the last standing, leaving only the two who fled, and the few wounded scattered about the yard. Yurik, still mounted, turned the horse to look at the carnage about him, and spied the woman over by the boy and girl child. Gods and bones. He touched heel to horse and rode that way. Ava whistled for the paint. As it came by, she vaulted onto its back, turning the beast. She rode out after the two men running wildly up the river. "Do you need help?" She waved him off and rode on. Folkgard began dragging the wounded into a pile. "Spare us, master. We meant no harm. We are but hungry and needed refuge." The dwarf tossed the man aside and mashed his head into the loamy earth with his iron boot. "That's a pretty tune, dog of a man. Sing it to the damned, for bunkmates you'll be before the sun sets." Yurik dropped from the saddle, his wounded leg giving only a little. "Does the boy live?" The woman looked up at him, her face matted with blood and hair. She wore torn clothing, but the blood seemed to be another's. Her eyes were swollen with grief. Next to her, the girl child stood quietly, though the cat squirmed still in her tight grasp. "His breathing is shallow. He's crossed to the pools, I fear. Your blade was too slow to punish the wicked." "Time is not always a measure of our deeds, lady." The knight knelt by the boy, setting his sword aside. The wound ran down across his face and then to his chest, rending flesh with its jagged blade. Gently peeling back the shirt, he lay the wound bare. The woman gasped, choking on grief such that she folded upon her lap and wept into the grass. "Fear nothing of the pools for this boy, my lady. He stood valiant against a foe thrice his size, and many still his skill. He stood his ground for this lass, his sister, I presume, and Heth will judge accordingly. If we cannot save him, he's to the stone fields and the halls of peace such heroes enjoy." Lifting her face, he said to her, "But we do not count our dead until the battle is over, and his has just begun. Fetch me the small green pouch in yonder saddlebags. There's needle and thread there." She stood quickly, as if his voice alone drove new purpose into her. "And that flask there, if it held in the charge." Turning to the boy, he pulled the flesh back, exposing it to the air. "By the first wind. Mend." He spoke those words quietly, and before the boy's mother returned with flask and pouch, the bleeding had stopped. Gently, Yurik cleaned the wound with the water and began to sew the rent flesh. He stopped and looked up and around. He could not see Ava, though Folkgard had trussed up the bandits and was walking his way. "Ava's hand is cleaner at this than mine. Hell, Folkgard's is too. Bones of Orndul, my horse's hand is cleaner at this. Folkgard, do you think you can put this child back together? I've cleaned the wound and touched it with Corthane's blessing, but fear my stitch work should leave him scarred." "I'll see what can be done. I'll need my stitching needle, but it rides upon yon mule that stands up there on the hill eating grass, as if nothing in the world should be amiss." "Blue, mule." Yurik spoke quickly, and the horse snorted joyfully as he rushed up the hill to hound the mule down it. Within a few moments, the dwarf knelt over the child, carefully weaving needle and thread through the open wounds, and bringing the flesh back together. Shortly, he pressed a poultice on it, gathered from what leaves Ava had given him, and wrapped the boy in bandages. Gently, they lifted him and carried him to the house. "Would that I had stopped to fetch my bow, they would both be on their way to the wretched plains." but only one joins his comrades. The other jumped into the river. To live or die, I cannot say. How fares the child? I think he might live. He's patched and healed as best as we could manage. Would that your sure hand did the stitches, but folk guards are as clean. They are cleaner than mine, if we speak the truth. He lay the child on a pallet of straw and reed, turning to the woman. You know what happens next. He will take a fever and fight this wound. You must tend to him well, or he'll take the road he's not ready to travel. Your rede is true, but your hands have blessed him, for he seems stronger than just moments before. Turning to the child. Gisli, fetch some cool water from the river and clean rags. At last, dropping the cat, the little girl ran out the door. Yurik passed from beneath the cabin into the smoke-filled yard. The fires burned fiercely now as the structures collapsed in on themselves. Thick clouds of smoke rose into the heavens. Crossing the yard, he came before the bandits. 3 lay against the wall. Folkguard sat upon a stump in front of them, seemingly contemplating their fate, but his mind lay far to the south, in his home of cool stone. How now? What to do with 3 murdering bandits? Master Knight, we but did the bidding of our chieftain. He was cruel and wicked and would slay us if we acted against him. Yurik looked over the men. The speaker lied, and was himself filled with deceit. A life of petty terror, and the marks of criminal deeds lined his face, and was plain for the knight to see. He could not see the same in the other 2, one of which held some dark secret near to him that he had not told even his companions. You are evil men, and your lives are littered with evil deeds. I judge them forfeit, for if given freedom, you'll continue to visit your petty spark upon others. He took them south along the river for some miles distant, and left them hanging in a tree, one next to the other. Their entreaties of promised wealth and lives worth living fell upon deaf ears, as the knight's mind lingered upon the image of the child cruelly attacked. So we're about 10 minutes out, but that is kind of the end of this section here. And I think that that's probably a pretty good place to go ahead and stop. I love this. I absolutely love The Fools of Don Hollow. I'm so excited to be reading this next chapter of Yurik and Ava's story. Steve has said that it is a love story between Yurik and Ava, and I feel like we're seeing little nuggets of that, and I'm very, very excited. Delightful story and reading. Well, thank you. And Kettern, welcome in. I saw you come in. It's good to see you. Another enjoyable Monday evening. Yeah, this is so lovely. I absolutely love doing these. Thanks for the story. Well, thanks for being here, Blaze. I appreciate you. It's the best kind of love story with lots of blood and gore. They've been through so much together. And they have so much respect for each other. It's so good. I'm excited to see, what happens, But let's go ahead and maybe toss a raid to somebody who's live. Let me take a quick look. How about... Thinking about it. There's this channel called Folk and Myth. I don't know what they're about, but hey, let's find out. It looks like they're doing an actual play, and it looks really great, and I love this person's glasses. So let's go and be super sweet. If you have time for it, it would mean a lot if you just like say one nice thing to the streamers before peacing out for the evening. But yeah, I super appreciate all y'all being here and hanging out. This was super lovely. I'll be live again back here Monday, probably like noon-ish Central, but not sure when just yet. And then after that, we'll be playing Curse of Strahd on Hearthcoven Games. So definitely come hang out. Thank you again for your time, for chilling with us. This was super fun. And yeah, go in peace, make the words do good, and I will see you again next time, very, very soon. Goodbye.